Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Bharati Karuna Patram Bharati Padabhushanam Bharati Padamarudham Bharati Tirthamashraye Vidya Vinaya Sampannam Vitaragam Vivekinam Vande Vedanta Tattvajnam Vidhushekhara Bharatim Om Namo Gurubhyaha. I am really fortunate today that I have been called to speak on a very great sage Vidyaranya. In fact, I feel blessed. It is a blessing of Parameshwara, it is a blessing of Chandramaulishwara, blessing of Sharada, blessing of Mahasannidhanam, and also blessing of Sannidhanam that I am here in front of all of you to speak something about a very great personality in our cultural history and also our religious history. In fact, today is the Guru Traya Samsmaranam. The three gurus whom we are remembering are, you are aware of Vidyatirtha, the very great temple which is there built in memory of him, that Vidya Shankara Devalaya. So that Vidyatirtha and again Bharati Tirtha and their student Vidyaranya. In fact, they succeeded one after the other. One after the other, Vidyatirtha was the first person, and then Bharati Tirtha succeeded him, and then Vidyaranya succeeded him. So that is how these three people, they played a very, very important role in the history of our culture, in the history of our dharma, in protecting our dharma. In fact, dharma is protected by the Swamijis only. And it was a time when these people appeared in history, say in 14th century. In that 14th century, it was a very, very turbulent period. If we see Indian history, it was a highly turbulent period when our country, not only our country, our culture, our people, they were under very great attack from the invaders. The invaders who had absolutely no idea about dharma. They had only their own notions about their own, religion, and then they wanted to spread their religion in the whole of the world. That is their mission. That was their mission, and that is their mission. Such people, they had already captured Delhi, and then they moved towards the south, and then in the south also they had captured lot many kingdoms, small kingdoms. And at that time also, as it is today, our leaders, they were all selfish people. They did not have a very great idea about the cultural unity of the country, the philosophical unity of the country. And these people, they were not interested, they were not aware of the dharma, the greatness of our dharma, the greatness of our heritage. Maybe some people were aware, but then many other people, they were also selfish. So if there are a few selfish people, it is enough to destroy the whole structure. So that is how our culture was under very great attack at that particular time. And whenever culture is in crisis, culture or dharma, we all know, you know better than me, that whenever dharma is in crisis, what does Lord Krishna say? Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bharata abhyuthanam adharmasya. He says, abhyuthana adharmasya abhyuthanam yada bhavati. Then Atmanam Srujamyaham. Then somebody comes. And at that time, these three people arrived. These three people, they were to guide the destiny of our country, the destiny of our dharma. And these are the people who stood and then who established the empires. All the three people played an important role in establishing that Vijayanagara empire, as we call it. And particularly during Vidyaranya's time, Vidyaranya, in fact, a very, very multifaceted personality, we can say. It was in his time that he inspired these two young princes, two young people, that is Harihar Raya and Bukkaraya. These two people, they were captured and then they were taken to Delhi and then they were converted into another religion also. But luckily, they were outside Delhi, and then somehow the sage Vidyaranya, he was able to inspire them. He saw that merit in them, he saw that Kshatriya dharma in them, and then he inspired them to form, or rather to establish, an empire that is in Hampi, Vidyanagara. It was called Vidyanagara. We know, of course, the Samrajya, the empire was called Vijayanagara Empire, but the name of the city was Vidyanagara. So that is the reason why we have got the title Karnataka Simhasana Sthapanacharya. So that is how the title has come, because Karnataka Simhasana was the Adi Rajadhani, Vidyanagari. Vidyanagara was the empire, was the capital of that empire. So that was the situation. So Vidyaranya had two roles, two phases of his personality. One is he was a Raja Guru. He was the guru for the king. The king was Bukkaraya at that time, and then he was also a philosopher. A Rajaguru at the same time and also a philosopher at the same time. So he was discharging his the duty. And in fact, Rajaguru used to play a very, very important role, because we have all read Ramayana. We know how Vasishtha was the Rajaguru for Rama and for Dasharatha and Rama. Similarly, we have got very great gurus, very great saints as Rajagurus. In our tradition, a king always had a great Maharshi as a guru. And in fact, that is what we see in Bhagavad Gita again. To refer to Bhagavad Gita, we see that Imam Vivasvate Yogam Proktavanaham Avyayam. There Shankaracharya writes, Brahma Kshatriya Paripalite Jagat Paripalaitum Alam, he writes. Brahma and Kshatra, that is the Raja Guru on one side and Kshatriya on the other side. These two people, if they are together and if they form a proper team, then the whole world can be ruled. So that is what he says. So that is exactly what was followed all through our history by all great kings. So this is one important point we see. And Vidyaranya was one such person who inspired Bukkaraya to establish an empire, and then he was, he also wrote several books. He is not only a Rajaguru who was looking after the all these the social activities, or rather the invasions were there, and then what should be the strategy, what should be the political strategy at that time. So in our culture, if we see, all these rishis, they were also experts in Rajaniti. As we see in Mahabharata, they were experts in Rajaniti, they were experts in Dandaniti, they were experts in Moksha Dharma, they were experts in all facets of Dharma. So he was like that. And as a first as a Rajaguru, he was the person who inspired this Harihararaya and Bukkaraya. And Dharma, as I said, it has to be protected both by Brahmana and by Kshatriya. Brahmana does the Shastra Rakshana. Brahmana or whoever is the Rajaguru, they do the Shastra Rakshana. Like our Peetham is doing the Shastra Rakshana. All the Shankara Peethams, they do the Shastra Rakshana. And not only Shastra Rakshana alone is not important. The Shastra Samstha Rakshana, or rather Dharma Samstha Rakshana, that is, social institutions are there. There are something like temples, there are various other institutions in the society. All those institutions have to be protected. It cannot be done by the Acharya alone, it has to be done by the king. So Shastra Rakshana is like protecting the soul. And Shastra, or rather Dharma Vyavastha Rakshana is like protecting the body. Without the body, the soul cannot exist. And without soul, body cannot exist. Body is of no use. So that is how this body and soul have to go together. So that is the connection between a Kshatriya and a Brahmana. Brahma Kshatriya Paripalite. So that is what Shankaracharya says. So that is how Vidyaranya played a very great role in guiding the king in all in his dharmic activities. And somebody may question, how can a sage, how can a Swami who has taken sannyasa, how can he indulge in laukika activities? For that, Vidyaranya himself answers in that Panchadashi you are going to listen to a speech talk by Sri Pandita Nagaraja Bhattaji. So there, in that Triptideepa Prakaranam, there are a couple of shlokas there. The example, one standard example given in this connection is Janaka, King Janaka. King Janaka, he was a ruler, he was also a great jnani. We see him in Bhagavad Gita also. So here in this Triptideepa Prakaranam, Vidyaranya says, Janakadehe katham rajyamiti chet drudha bodhatah tatha tavapi chet tarkam patha yadva krushim kuru. Janaka was such a person who was established in the oneness of the being. He was established in that Advaita Brahma Drushti. Such a person, such a drushti, if you also have such a vision, then you do whatever you want. If you want to, whatever you want, okay, if you feel like studying Tarka, you study Tarka. If you feel like doing some other thing, you do that. But then you be established in the knowledge of Brahman. So that is what he says. Mithyatva vasanadardhye prarabdha kshaya kangshaya. Aklishyantah pravartante swasva karmanusarataha. For Janaka, the explanation given was, there is what is called a prarabdha karma. You are very well aware of what is prarabdha karma. And because of that prarabdha karma, his duty was to rule the kingdom. He was a king, he was a wise person. But at the same time, he had the responsibility to rule. And he can't abdicate his responsibility. So that is the reason why he was like that. So that is how the answer was given there. And when we see I'll just refer to a few books only of Sri Vidyaranya, just to tell him, just to explain to you how Vidyaranya was a very, very great teacher. First of all, he was a very great teacher. He was very much interested in what we call humanizing knowledge. So this is a very big word. Humanizing knowledge is, for example, Vedas are there. Vedas are rather inscrutable to the common reader. They are inscrutable to the common man. So how to bring them close to the common man? Common man means a common reader, a person who is interested, a student of Veda. Till that time, there were several people who said that Vedas, they were meaningless utterances. So all types of comments were being made on the Vedas. So it was very much necessary for sage Vidyaranya to see that a proper commentary was written on the Vedas, Veda Bhashya. So he, along with history, shows that history, of course, many historians, they have studied what are called the inscriptions, stone inscriptions and various other inscriptions, and then various other contemporary literature and all that. And they have shown that sage Vidyaranya was responsible. He, along with Sayanacharya, and then along with some other people, some other great scholars of that particular time, it was a very big, great monumental work to write the Bhashya, the commentaries on all the four Vedas. And it was very, 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 very important at that time. Because without the meaning of that, without establishing a proper meaning, students will be clueless. They will just learn Veda, they will be reciting Veda, they will not know what is the meaning of the Veda. And prior to Vidyaranya, of course, they had the guidance of Shankaracharya, they had the guidance of sage Vyasa, or rather Badarayana, who wrote Brahma Sutras. About Brahma Sutras, we know, many of you very well know. In that Brahma Sutras, the greatest attempt, or rather the greatest achievement of Brahma Sutras was to establish a unity of thought in all the sentences of the Upanishads. If you just read Upanishads just like that, you think that, oh, here something is said, some other place something else is said. There is some contradiction, apparent contradiction. So, what the Brahma Sutras they do is to establish the Ekavakyata, that is the unity of thought in the whole of Upanishadic literature. And that was again elaborated by Shankaracharya. The same thing was elaborated by Shankaracharya. He established Advaita Vedanta. He established what is called the non-dual philosophy in the Upanishads. Then Shankaracharya and Badarayana, they were actually the inspiration, they were actually the guide, keeping that as the model. You see the Veda Bhashya in the same fashion. You see, otherwise somebody could have written in some other manner. You see, if you see the Veda Bhashya of Vidyaranya, in the same line of thought, the Karma Kanda, Jnana Kanda, everything, Upasana, everything was established. To give a very small example, if we see the commentary on Purusha Sukta. Purusha Sukta, we all know, because of the commentary very, very clearly says Sahasra Shirsha Purusha. Sahasra Shirsha, what does it mean? It is not as though one big man is there with 1,000 heads. It is meant for Upasana, that all the Antahkaranas of all the living beings, they belong to one particular entity called Virat. And that Virat is the sum and substance, or the whole, all the Antahkaranas of all beings. That Virat, that not Virat, that Purusha. So that Purusha, or rather Hiranyagarbha, as we call it, Hiranyagarbha is the Sushma Sharira, and then Virat is the Sthola Sharira. And all the limbs, all the Sahasrakshaha, Sahasrapat, all the not only Antahkaranas, all the limbs and all these Karmendriya, Jnanendriyas, they belong to one. So that is to do Upasana on the unity of being. We are all one. So our approach in the Vedic literature is to see oneness in all things. That is what we say, avibhaktam vibhakteshu. Though 100 people are there, our approach is to see unity in all of them, not to see division, not to see them as divided. Oh, he belongs to this caste, he is from this group, that group, etc. We don't divide people. We want to see unity in all the people. So that is the approach of our Indian philosophy. So that is the approach which is adopted by sage Vidyaranya in that. And another important book was Parashara Madhaviyam. I am first of all, I am referring to two books which talk about what is called Pravrutti Dharma. Any great philosopher, he has to see two things. One is Pravrutti Dharma and the other is Nivrutti Dharma. The Pravrutti Dharma is about how a human being has to conduct himself in society. That is, Veda Bhashya tells him, oh, this is the karma you have to do, these are all the yajnas you have to do, this is how you have to behave, etc., etc. And Upasana, Jnana Kanda, Upanishads, when it comes to that, Jnana tells what is the reality, what is the ultimate reality, etc. So both are important. Pravrutti Dharma and Nivrutti Dharma are both important because proper Pravrutti Dharma alone leads to Nivrutti level. So at the level of Pravrutti Dharma, he has written what is called Veda Bhashya. He has again written Parashara Madhaviyam. Parashara Smriti. We know that every Smriti is broadly, any big Smriti if we see it, broadly has three parts. One is the Achara Kanda, that is how a person has to conduct himself in various religious matters. And Vyavahara Kanda. Vyavahara is Loka Vyavahara. That is when you go out, you have some interaction with some shopkeeper, you have interaction with somebody takes away our property, or somebody steals something else. So this is all Loka Vyavahara. So in Vyavahara, how a person has to, how the king has to control. Then what is called Prayaschitta Kanda. For something which we have done knowingly or unknowingly, what we have to do. It is a sort of a punishment, or rather, which is a self-disciplining exercise. Prayaschitta is a sort of self-disciplining exercise. So these three parts are very important in all important Smritis. We know that Smriti is different from Shruti. Shruti is only Vedas, we call them Shruti. And Smriti is something taking the spirit of the Vedas. We take the spirit of the Vedas and we write a secondary text, what we call secondary text, for the guidance of all the people. So if we see the Smritis, they are like a sort of timetable. Not only timetable for 1 day or 2 days, it is a lifetime timetable. And for all the people in the society, for all people, Brahmana, Kshatriya, for all the Varnas, it tells the timetable right from morning till evening, from birth to death. From birth to death, from morning till evening, it is a lifetime timetable for all the people in the society. That is what a Smriti is. And in our tradition, that is the uniqueness of our tradition. In no other tradition do we find this. So this is one thing which he wrote, Parashara Madhaviyam, Parashara Smriti. Parashara, sage Parashara, we know, Vyasa's father. He had written only Achara Kanda and Prayaschitta Kanda. He had left out Vyavahara Kanda. That is how a king has to rule, how the governance, what we call the governance in modern language. So the governance and the rules, they do change from time to time. So that is the reason why sage Parashara, he left out Vyavahara Kanda. Because Smriti, there are certain things in Dharma which change and which do not change. For example, Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma, there are certain eternal values which do not change. There are some other things which do change. There is a lot of sociological change. There is a lot of technological change. Because of technological change, what sort of, there is a life pattern also changes. When the life pattern changes, what type of dharma, how should a person perform dharma? So that also has to be written. So Smriti changes from time to time. That is the reason why we have about 40 odd Smritis. Not only Manusmriti, we have got about 40 odd Smritis. From time to time, we have got several Smritis. So Smriti is actually the application of Shruti to the changing times. So that is what Smriti does. And Kalau Parashara Smriti, that is what is the saying. But in this Kali Yuga, Parashara Smriti is the Smriti which is applicable. So that Smriti also is very important. So that is how, in fact, Vidyaranya, if I visualize, he is a sort of disciplinarian, a person who wanted to establish discipline in the society. So that is the reason why he first wrote Veda Bhashya, then again he wrote Parashara Madhaviyam, a very elaborate guide, a very elaborate discussion on how a king has to conduct himself and all that. Then one more book, one important book if we see, is it is something like how an ideal guru, an ideal acharya conducted himself. That is Madhaviya Shankara Vijayam. I will briefly refer to that also. Madhaviya Shankara Vijayam refers to a very, very dynamic role which the acharya at that time played in very, very critical situations, in crisis situations, in guiding the society. And so that is what we see in Shankara Vijayam. Shankara Vijayam, we know, many of you might have read this Shankara Vijayam. In that Shankara Vijayam, right from the Avatara, Shankara is described as an Avatara Purusha. And in that Avatara, right from morning, from birth till he gets back to Kailasa, the whole thing is described. So there, certain important things which we see from the sociological point of view, what we see is that this Shankaracharya, he also guided the kings. Like Vidyaranya also guided the kings. Vidyaranya also guided the kings. Shankaracharya also guided the kings. Vidyaranya, if we see about his coming back to his Rajaguru's role, he also held meetings with the people of different traditions. For example, Jainas. He held meetings with these Vaishnavas. So he was interested in having what we call Mata Samarasyam, or rather harmony among various traditions. So he did not want our own Indian traditions to battle with one another, but then he wanted unity among all the internal traditions. So in fact, one Shravana Belagula Shasanam, historians have pointed out that there is one Shasanam in Shravana Belagula, where Vidyaranya intervened when the Vaishnavas and Jainas were quarreling, and then he worked out some sort of compromise between them, and he was instrumental for religious harmony within Indian traditions at that particular time. And Shankaracharya, if we see, Shankaracharya also did the same. He was one person, he toured from, we know that you know much better. He traveled from Kerala to Kashmir, and then he evaluated various traditions which were there at that particular time, and then he standardized some 6 prominent traditions which were there in various parts of the country, and that is the reason why he was called Shanmatasthapanacharya. So he standardized various traditions. So that is what we see. And in the Shankara Vijayam, one important thing which we see is chapters 8 and 9. Chapters 8 and 9 of Shankara Vijayam, they give a very great example, example of an important point in our tradition. Usually when two religions they quarrel, they fight with swords. When somebody, for example, in the Western countries, if we see all over, except in India, all over the world, if we see, whenever a new religion came up, they took swords or guns, and then they went out. But in India, they did not take out swords. Their battle was only with words. SWORDS, that yes, you take out yes, and then only swords were not there, only words were there. So this debating tradition is something which is very, very unique to Indian tradition. And if we want to establish truth, you see, in religion, what happens? In religion, they say, yes, our belief is like this. Religion is a belief system, whereas ours is not a belief system. Ours is a philosophical approach. We say, tapasa brahma vijignyasasva. You think, and then you realize truth. So that is what is our approach. Our approach is when, for example, in that Upanishad, the son goes to the father, and he tells him, he requests him, oh father, you tell me what is Brahman. And the father tells him, no, I cannot straight away tell. You have to think for yourself. You have got some equipment in order to think. It is somewhat, mind is like a laboratory. You have got your mind, you have got 5 indriyas, and then you have got karmendriya, jnanendriya, tapas, and you have got this annamaya kosha, pranamaya kosha, manomaya kosha, and then you think for yourself, tapasa brahma vijignyasasva, he says. So that is how we don't say, yes, I tell you, listen, otherwise I'll cut off your head. We don't say. We only say, you think and realize for yourself. You know the truth by contemplating, by viveka. Viveka is actually, that is to distinguish the right from the wrong. Viveka is vichar, that is prathak bhave, that is to distinguish right from the wrong. You have to do it for yourself. Then only it stands very firmly in our mind. If you do viveka properly, it firmly stands in our mind. So that is what we see in that Mandana Mishra versus Shankaracharya debate. Mandana Mishra, we know that I need not take much time to elaborate it. Mandana Mishra was a person who was very steeply, confirmed in Mimamsa tradition. Whereas Shankaracharya, his tradition is the Upanishadic tradition, that is Vedanta tradition. So there was a debate. And Mimamsa tradition, it does not bother for Atma Jnana. Mimamsa tradition says heaven is the highest. So Shankaracharya says heaven, we also accept heaven, but then it is at a Vyavahara level. It is not as though we are dismissing heaven. We do accept heaven, but we accept it at a Vyavahara sthai, but not at the Paramartha level. So the debate went on for days and days and days. And when Shankaracharya went, how did they debate? And then who was the, judge between them? Both were equally eminent people. That Mimamsaka, Mandana Mishra was also a very, very great scholar. So and then who had to be the judge? Then Shankaracharya chooses the wife of Mandana Mishra, Ubhaya Bharati, who is actually the avatara of Saraswati. And Saraswati, goddess Saraswati had taken birth as Ubhaya Bharati, and the Shankaracharya chooses her as the judge. So that is what we see. And how does she judge them? She judges, so she attends to her household duties, and then she puts two garlands, fresh garlands, one round the neck of Shankaracharya and one round the neck of Mandana Mishra. Okay, now you start discussing. And the way they discussed was, when you are debating with any rival doctrine, a person of rival doctrine, for example, Mimamsa is one doctrine, Advaita Vedanta is another doctrine, Nyaya is another doctrine. When you are debating with another person of another doctrine, how should you debate? So these wonderful slokas are there. Anyonyam uttaram akhandayatam pragalbham baddhasanau smita vikasi mukharavindav na sveda kampa gaganekshanashalinavva na krodhavak chalamavadi niruttarabhyam. So when you are debating, you should not get angry. When we get angry, you sweat all over the body. Like maybe I am getting some sweat on my nose now. So you are not supposed to sweat. You are not supposed to use harsh words, and you have to you should keep on a smiling face, and then in a smiling way, without getting excited, without getting emotionally worked up, you have to debate. You have to discuss. So actually, this vada is something, a tradition. Vada is to establish the truth. When we are trying to know the truth, then vada is to know the truth only. It is not vada, jalpa, vitanda, you know very well. Vada is to establish truth when with an open mind. I have an open mind, you have an open mind, and we have to establish truth. Jalpa is when I want to defeat you. Whatever you say, I want to defeat you. I want to prove my own point. And vitanda is I don't even have a point, but I want to defeat you. So this vada is, that is why Lord Krishna says, vada pravadatamaham. Vada is my own. Debate is divine, and no other tradition says this. We have got such a wonderful tradition. Debate is divine. So that is what we see in this Shankara Vijayam. And so there is a discussion on Tattvamasi. There is a discussion on Dvasuparnasa Yuja Sakhaya. So I will not go into those debates. And Mandana Mishra outright, he dismisses that statement called Tattvamasi. It is a meaningless statement, he says. something like whom, fat, etc. It is a very, very meaningless statement. Then slowly and slowly and slowly he comes up one step after the other, one step after the other. He comes up, and then he has no other way but to accept what Shankaracharya was saying. And that is such a beautiful debate. And when Ubhaya Bharati invites them for lunch, she first invites her husband, oh, come for lunch and come for bhiksha, because yati we don't invite yati for lunch. We invite him for bhiksha. So she used to invite her husband for lunch and invite Shankaracharya for bhiksha. And at the end of 1 month or so, when the debate went on, and when Mandana Mishra had no answers for what Shankaracharya was saying, then one day she finally says, both of you come for bhiksha. So that means this gentleman had lost. Mandana Mishra had lost and he had no other way. So both of you come for bhiksha, she says, without overtly saying, without saying that you are now defeated, without saying that you just come for bhiksha. It is a very nice way of saying. So that is what we see in that book, and then we see how Shankaracharya goes from place to place and then discusses with various people, refines various traditions. So that is what we see in that book. In that book, one point we have to note is that it is not as though Karmakanda is denounced. It is not as though Jaimini is denounced. There, the position of Karmakanda, the limitations of Karmakanda are shown. It is only to that extent. Only Karmakanda definitely has a place. Karma has definitely a place, but it has got a limitation. So that is what we see in that book. And Vedanta Panchadashi, I just briefly refer to that, because Vedanta Panchadashi, our scholar he will be saying in a very great detail. It is again about what we call Sat Chit and Ananda. There are 15 prakaranas. All these 15 prakaranas, they can be divided into 3 groups. The first group is talking about what is Chit, Sat, that what is truth. And then the second again is talking about Chit, and finally is talking about, this is roughly the structure. And the very opening lines, if we see, the very opening lines means leaving the Prarthana shlokas. The first few lines itself, themselves, they talk about the eternality of consciousness. We talk about this jnanam, that is something, satyam jnanam anantam brahma, when we say jnanam is something, or chit is something which is all pervading and which is eternal. And that point is initially is discussed or rather established in the very opening shlokas. So that is what we see in the prakarana, and in that structure we see Tattva Viveka Prakarana, and for example Mahabhuta Viveka Prakarana, and again Panchakosha Viveka Prakarana. This Viveka is just analyzing. So in fact, this is what we see. Many modern Swamis, if we go to Rishikesh and all these places, we find very many modern Swamis, English Swamis. Some people, there are all foreign Swamis also come. American Swamis, they come to Rishikesh and such places, and then they keep talking. And they talk about what is called this guided meditation. You might have heard about the word called guided meditation. All these guided meditations are nothing but, they are just taken from our prakaranas only. Guided meditations are taken from, for example, Tattva Viveka Prakarana, it can form a guided meditation. Mahabhuta Viveka Prakarana, it is a guided meditation. Panchakosha Viveka Prakarana, that again is a guided meditation. You just sit and then you start meditating. Am I the Annamaya Kosha? Am I the Pranamaya Kosha? So that is exactly what is told in those meditations. And similarly, many of the Prakaranas of Shankaracharya, they are straight away, they can be translated, or rather they can be transformed into guided meditations. So that is how we see in this Vedanta Panchadashi. Of course, we are going to listen more from Nagaraja Bhattaji. And Upanishads, in fact, the entire summary of Upanishads, we can say that it is given in a very, very lucid form. And here, Vidyaranya, he is targeting, or rather he is keeping in mind the seekers, mumukshus. He is keeping in mind the mumukshus. In the beginning, he was talking about those who are in pravritti marga. Here, in Vedanta Panchadashi or Jivan Mukti Viveka, he is talking about people who are mumukshus. He is having those people in mind, and for the sake of mumukshus, he is presenting Vedanta, or rather the summary of Upanishads in very, very simple language. And sometimes if we see his shlokas, some shlokas it is as though he is giving a slap on our cheek. So he is such a hard-hitting shlokas. Some shlokas, they will be very, very hard-hitting, and his style is so beautiful. So that is how this text is there. Then the last book I refer to, one book called Jivan Mukti Viveka. That also you might have heard. Jivan Mukti Viveka. Jivan Mukti, you are familiar with that word. That is religion. What does it say normally? You do all this punya karma and then you will go to heaven, you will enjoy, you will be there for some time and then you will again come back. Of course, our religion says like that, but many other religions, they say, you just believe in our God and then you will be there in heaven eternally. We don't say that. Your stay in that heaven is proportionate, or rather directly proportionate to whatever good work you have done here. And your punyam is like your debit card. You go to that heaven, and then so long as your money is there in your debit card, you are there, and once the money is over, you will come back. You are honorably, very honorably sent back. So that is what happens in heaven. So Jivan Mukti is much, much beyond that. And when you go to heaven, you come back again, you have to take birth again and again, you have to take birth. You are not released, or rather liberated from this cycle of this birth and death. So if you want this liberation from birth and death, then what have we to do? We have to realize the truth. You have to realize the truth that you are not different from Brahman, and whatever we see is not different from Brahman. It is what is Brahman. That is Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. You have to experience it. Unless you experience it, once you experience it, you are now Jivan Mukta. Jivan Mukta means you are free from all these limitations. So long as I think that I am so and so, I am this. I am so and so, say I am a good man or a bad man, I am a scholar, or I am so on, like this. So long as I have got an identity, I have got my own limitations. So I go beyond all the limitations, I go beyond all the identities. So that is what is a Jivan Mukta. And this Jivan Mukti Viveka is a sort of guide. Again, Vidyaranya is essentially a very great educationist, a very great teacher. He keeps in mind a very ordinary student, and then he tells in a very, very straightforward way. And in that book, you see, this book, of course, you might have noticed that this book is deeply influenced by Yoga Vasishta. Very, very many shlokas from Yoga Vasishta are quoted in that book. And then, one more thing is, it is basically about sadhana. It is about sadhana, vairagya abhyasa, as we say. Vairagya has to be practiced. And for that, it starts with what is called Vasana Kshaya. Vasana is something, some predispositions. Vidyaranya defines Vasana as Purvapara Paramarsyamantarena Sahasa Utpadyamanasya Krodhadi Vritti Visheshasya Hetuhu Chittagata Samskaro Vasana. It is a Chittagata Samskara. Chittagata Samskara, so that is something which is there, which is embedded in our subconscious. You see a person. The moment you see a person, you become angry. That means you are having a vasana, you are having something, a sort of predisposition to him. Because some other previous interaction with him has created a sort of impression in the subconscious. That the moment I see, or rather suppose I don't like a particular thing. The moment I see it, the again subconscious thing, it comes out. So that vasana kshaya is what is needed for a seeker. Unless you eradicate, unless you eliminate all the bad vasanas, and all the bad vasanas have to be replaced by good vasanas. That means you have to do good practice. Shavana, manana, etc. These are the good practices. Now you are all sitting here for a lecture, listen to a lecture. This is one good practice. You go when you go out, something is there in the mind. Some sort of impression, some positive impression will be there in the mind. Then that positive impression is the vasana. So, Purvapara Paramarsham Antarena, without evaluating at that particular time, whatever is there already in the mind, that comes up. So, Vasana Kshaya is something what we see in very many Puranas also. Here I can tell, there is some little bit of time I will take. If we see the story of Rakta Bija, you are all very familiar with the story of Rakta Bija. Rakta Bija, that the moment the Devi hits him with a sword, for every drop, another man of equal strength, he arises. And what does it mean? Vasana, when there is a vasana and when it finds a fertile ground, it again comes up. Suppose I have some bad vasana, bad samskara which is there in me. And suppose somebody comes and then he says, hey, okay, let's go out and let's do this. And some bad samskara immediately can come up. Unless I eradicate all the bad samskaras, the samskara can again rise up like that Rakta Bija. And Rakta Bija Vadha symbolizes that Vasana Kshaya, that is what we see in that. Similarly, another chapter is Mano Nasha. How you have to neutralize the mind. This mind is the greatest obstacle. You all know very well that mind is the means for moksha and mind is the means for bondage also. So, mind is a very great obstacle so long as it is moving outwards. It is an bahirmukha. As long as it is bahirmukham, it is a very great obstacle. So, this mano nasha again has to be done. How mano nasha has to be done? Very wonderful prakarnas. There is a lot of psychology in this. And in fact, many modern psychologists, they have taken many ideas. If you actually see our literature, not only this Vedanta literature, but also yoga, this Patanjali Yoga Sutras and all the bhashyas on that, you find, if you see the modern psychological theories, they have very silently taken up and then they have transformed the names and then they have popularized. Anyway, they have done a good thing, they have popularized all these things in the Western world. So, but then for us, we also have to know what our books say. And it's a very great work on psychology about how a person has to train his mind. Because training the mind is very, very essential when we are a seeker. Because for a seeker, it seems like a bird. Like a bird has to have two wings. A seeker also has to have two angles. That is, one is knowledge and the other is vairagya. Vairagya bodhavu purushasya pakshivat, says Shankaracharya in that Viveka Chudamani. Vairagya and bodha purushasya pakshivat pakshav vijanihi vichakshanatvam, he says. Hey vichakshana, pakshav vijanihi. They are like the two wings of a bird. And if you are flying only with one wing, suppose I read only Vedanta and then I don't train myself, I don't train my mind, I don't practice Vasanakshaya, I don't practice Mano Nasha, then I may be a good scholar, I may be a good teacher, but I cannot be a good seeker. So that is why a mumukshu has to practice both. It is only when you practice both, then only the bird can fly and then sit on the mansion called Mukti. That mansion or rather that great building called Mukti. So that is how this Vedanta Panchadashi goes. So with this I think I'll briefly end. So Vidyaranya, just to conclude, sage Vidyaranya, one of the greatest persons after Shankaracharya. The greatest name is that of Vidyaranya. That is what we see. And he was first of all a very great educationist. He wanted to train many people. He wanted to train many people. That is the reason why he wrote Veda Bhashya, he wrote Parasharamadhaviyam, and then he particularly targeted these mumukshus. And so that is his contribution. And I always conclude by saying that we are very, very fortunate to have been born in this great tradition. Because our tradition is such egalitarian tradition, such an all-inclusive tradition. We don't exclude anybody. Whatever all the modern talk about liberalism and what about all those things, they are there in our own Upanishads. So we are very, very fortunate, particularly to have been born in this non-dual tradition, in this Advaita tradition. Whoever is born, we are so fortunate because we don't hate anybody, we don't exclude anybody. So with these words, and it is our duty to preserve it, it is our duty to propagate it, it is our duty to live it. And with these few words, I again, my pranams at the feet of our Sannidhanam Swamiji for he has very patiently listened so far and then he has given such a long time to me. And I seek forgiveness if I have exceeded my limit and if I have uttered something beyond my scope. Namaskar.